Today is day 79 since Nancy Guthrie vanished, so it has now been almost 80 days since this 84-year-old woman literally just disappeared from her home in Tucson, Arizona. Some new information in this episode I'm getting into. First of all, remember the two ransom notes that came early on that went to the TV stations in Arizona? Those are the notes that we believe Savannah Guthrie was referencing when she said that she thought two of the notes were real and legitimate. Well, there was a Bitcoin account, and we've got some new information about a transaction in that Bitcoin account early on, and a note in the Bitcoin account, specifically that seems like it's either from the FBI or from the Guthrie family. So I'm going to tell you exactly what we know, the new information. How much do you think they're consulting the family in the decision of whether to reach out again?
They're going to consult them before every significant move, and a lot of insignificant moves. But they won't be in, the Guthries won't be in the squad bay or the FBI conference room when they, determine what their strategy recommendations are going to be. And, certainly, I mean, think of it this way. It is not this relationship, but it has some similar.
First of all, remember the two ransom notes that came early on that went to the TV stations in Arizona? Those are the notes that we believe Savannah Guthrie was referencing when she said that she thought two of the notes were real and legitimate. Well, there was a Bitcoin account, and we've got some new information about a transaction in that Bitcoin account early on, and a note in the Bitcoin account, specifically, that seems like it's either from the FBI or from the Guthrie family. So, I'm going to tell you exactly what we know, the new information about that coming up. Also, I'm talking to retired FBI agent Steve Moore, good friend of the show. You guys have seen him many times. But specifically, I'm asking him about what some of these profilers have told me recently. You know, I've spoken to several retired FBI profilers who have come up with a profile of who they believe is responsible for the Nancy Guthrie abduction based on the information that they have. And Steve is going to explain how the agents on the ground actually investigating the case use the information from the profilers, and they use the information to help them investigate. How exactly does that work, though? And Steve is the perfect person because he has had investigations where he's used profilers before. I also wanted to see what he thought about some of what they're telling me, like the fact that they believe the person responsible is someone who knew Nancy Guthrie. What does he think about that? Plus some of these other details that they had, that it may have been retribution. I'm curious what Steve thinks because, again, he was one of the agents who was actually working the cases like this on the ground. So I'm going to talk to Steve. But the first thing I wanted to ask you about is this new information coming from Brianna Whitney, who's a reporter with the CBS station in Phoenix. And that's one of the stations that received the first two ransom letters, the ones that we believe Savannah was referencing when she said that she thought two were real. And they're now divulging the station that when they looked back into the Bitcoin wallet, there was activity on February 10th, and there's been no activity since. So this would have been a couple of months ago, right when the letters first came out. And a small amount of money was put into the account along with a note that said, "We are ready to talk, contact us." And then there was a link for how to reach out to them. And there's no way to know for sure that that was the FBI or Savannah Guthrie, but it seems like it would kind of make sense. What do you think it means that they put that note in there, but it seems there was no response? Well, I don't think we know that there was no response. There was no response that was visible to us. But I think that what that is the FBI saying, if it was the FBI, which makes sense, it's them saying, hey, you know, we're in a negotiation here. This is not something where we're going to play the game where you just dictate terms to us because, you know, it's that whole thing. Well, this is your only mother, you know, you want her back, so you better meet our terms. And they would say, we're your only victim. So if you don't get money from us, you don't get a dime. So we're both in this, you know, a zero-sum endgame. I mean, this is big. And so there is wiggle room in negotiations. I can guarantee you, not every negotiation, but it really depends on how you do the negotiation. How much do you think they're consulting the family in the decision of whether to reach out again? They're going to consult them before every significant move, and a lot of insignificant moves. But they won't be in the Guthrie won't be in the squad bay or the FBI conference room when they determine what their strategy recommendations are going to be. And certainly, I mean, think of it this way: it is not this relationship, but it has some similarities to a person who is on trial and they have an attorney. That attorney is an expert in the law, and they've seen this type of case so many times. But if the defendant wants to plead guilty, you know, you can't talk them out of it. I mean, I'm sure you could try, but Ultimately, the decision is going to rest with a defendant. And in the FBI, it's very clear when you're going through training and when you start working these types of cases that you are working as an adjunct to the victims. You are trying to help them at the same time. You are trying to capture the kidnapper. And so, it comes down to what's more important, capturing the kidnapper or you getting the victim back. And that's where the rub comes in. Usually, I used to argue that there's no difference. If you get the victim, you get the kidnapper. If you get the kidnapper, you get the victim if they're still alive. Everyone has been looking at the ransom notes, the Bitcoin wallet, the TV stations, the TMZ angle, the proof of life that never came. And almost nobody has stopped to ask why the noise was so loud in the first place. Real kidnappers don't go public. Every FBI agent, every profiler, every investigator who has worked a case like this will tell you the same thing. If you want money, you stay quiet. You go directly to the family. You control the information. You do not call the news. So why did they? There are only two explanations. Either the people who sent those notes were amateurs who had no idea what they were doing, or the ransom was never the point. The noise was the point. The spectacle was the point. Making sure everyone was looking at the letters while something else entirely was happening. Profilers working this case keep coming back to one word: benefit. Who benefits from Nancy Guthrie disappearing? That question is about to change everything you thought you knew about this case. We are now 80 days in. Think about what 80 days actually means, not as a number, but as a feeling. 80 mornings that Savannah Guthrie has woken up not knowing. 80 nights her family has gone to sleep with that specific, suffocating kind of dread that has no name because there is no word for it. Not grief because grief requires a certainty that hasn't come. Not hope because hope at 80 days costs something. Just the not knowing. Investigative journalist Brian Entin spoke this week with retired FBI Special Agent Steve Moore. And something Moore said is worth sitting with. When Entin asked him whether the FBI would push harder on that Bitcoin wallet, whether they'd reach back out, deposit more, try again, Moore paused. And then he said what the FBI tells families in cases like this when they sit them down privately. The agents would tell them the chances of recovering Nancy alive are, in Moore's words, infinitely small. Infinitely small. That's not nothing. That's everything. And it tells us more about where this investigation actually is than anything the Puma County Sheriff has said publicly in 3 months. Now here's what's new, and here's where it gets complicated. A hair was recovered from NY's home. This is not new. Investigators sent it to a lab in Florida months ago, a lab the Puma County Sheriff's Office has a long-standing relationship with. What is new is that this week that hair was transferred not to another private lab, to Quantico, to the FBI's own forensic facility, the most advanced DNA testing operation in the country. They are calling it advanced testing. Think about what that means. You don't send evidence to Quantico for routine confirmation. You send it there when you have something you can't fully explain with the tools you already have. You send it there when you believe what you're holding matters, and you need to know exactly how much. Moore told Anon something about this that deserves attention. He said when Nancy was taken, whoever did it leaned over that bed. And when you lean over a bed, when you exert any kind of physical effort at all, hair falls. It happens in restaurant kitchens, which is why cooks wear hairettes. It happens everywhere every day without people even noticing. They may have left the most damning piece of evidence they could have left and not even known it, and it points somewhere that changes the shape of this entire investigation. The first thing they agree on: this was not a stranger. Dr. Gary Baccato walked in through the statistics, and this wasn't theory. This was data. 92% of women who are murdered are killed by someone they knew. Not necessarily someone close, not necessarily a friend or family member, but someone who had been in their orbit. Someone whose face on the day everything changed did not make Nancy Guthrie afraid. There was no reason to be afraid. That's what made it possible. You would have opened the door too. The second thing they agree on, and this is where Dr. Amber Burgess took it further, is the question of benefit. She kept returning to it over and over like a compass needle finding north. Not who did this, who benefits from this, who is better off in any measurable way with Nancy Guthrie gone. That question cuts through everything. It cuts through the ransom notes, it cuts through the Bitcoin wallet, it cuts through the TMZ circus, because if the ransom was never real, if it was always theater, then benefit stops being about money entirely. And that opens a door that nobody in this investigation has publicly walked through yet. Cases like this one don't stay cold because the evidence isn't there. They stay cold because no one refuses to stop looking. That's what this channel exists for. If that matters to you, subscribe, turn on notifications, because what comes next in this case is the part that is going to break it open. Now let's keep going. Here's what the profiler's portrait of this person looks like. Hold this carefully because it isn't a name, it isn't a face, but it is a shape, a silhouette that the evidence is beginning to fill in. He and both profilers used male pronouns. Is not afraid. That word came up independently from two separate people. Unafraid. The surveillance footage from the front camera at NY's home shows someone moving without hesitation. No looking over the shoulder, no hurried steps, no visible calculation. Moore's read on that word is important. He told Entin that unafraid usually means overconfident, and overconfident people make mistakes they don't notice until it's too late. They leave hairs on bed sheets. They send ransom notes to television stations because they think the spectacle makes them untouchable. They're not untouchable. They just don't know it yet. Dr. Burgess also raised something that nobody wants to say directly, but that the facts keep pointing toward. More than one person was involved, a structure, possibly someone who planned this and someone or more than one someone who carried it out, a blueprint in hands. If that's true, it means there are people walking around right now who know what happened to Nancy Guthrie. Not one person sitting with a secret, multiple people, and secrets with multiple owners don't hold forever, they never do. Now, let's close the loop that was opened at the beginning because the question that changes everything still needs its answer. The ransom notes went public. They went to TV stations. They went to TMZ. The people who sent them wanted an audience, not a transaction. Every experienced investigator working this case has confirmed that this is almost unheard of in a legitimate kidnapping for ransom, which means one of two things is true. Either they were so arrogant, so overconfident, just like the profilers described, that they genuinely thought going public was their leverage, that the spectacle would pressure the family into paying without any negotiation at all. Or the ransom was a costume, something to dress the disappearance in so that everyone spent 80 days arguing about Bitcoin wallets while the real motive, whatever someone actually needed to accomplish by taking Nancy, went completely unexamined. Both possibilities lead to the same place. Someone who knew her. Someone who had calculated what they stood to gain. Someone who moved through her world without triggering a single alarm until the morning everything went quiet. That hair in Quantico may already have the answer. Advanced testing, a follicle, or enough of a shaft to work with using technology that didn't exist 5 years ago. A name attached to a strand of something that fell without thinking onto an 84-year-old woman's bed sheets. Nancy Guthrie has been missing for 80 days. She deserves more than a number. She deserves an answer. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe the ransom was ever real, or was it always something else? Every single one gets read. If this case matters to you, if Nancy matters to you, subscribe and stay with us because we are not letting this go. The disappearance of 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie has reached a haunting and pivotal 80-day milestone, a duration that investigative experts and retired FBI agents like Steve Moore describe not merely as a chronological number, but as a profound psychological weight characterized by a suffocating kind of dread for her family, specifically Savannah Guthrie, who has endured 80 mornings of agonizing uncertainty and 80 nights devoid of the closure that only certainty, or at least a definitive answer, can provide. This case, which began with the baffling emergence of 2 ransom notes sent directly to television stations in Arizona, notes that were early on identified by Savannah Guthrie as potentially legitimate, has now shifted into a complex digital and forensic maze involving a Bitcoin wallet that showed a mysterious spark of activity on February 10th, where a small deposit was accompanied by a direct message stating, "We are ready to talk. Contact us." A move widely interpreted by seasoned investigators as a strategic reach-out by the FBI or the Guthrie family to establish a line of communication and test the kidnappers' resolve. Steve Moore, drawing from his extensive experience on the ground in high-stakes kidnappings, explains that such a move is a classic negotiation tactic where the authorities attempt to flip the script on the abductors, reminding them that while they may hold the victim, the family holds the only source of the financial reward they claim to seek, creating a zero-sum endgame where every move is calculated and every silence is heavy with tactical meaning. However, the most disturbing realization shared by Moore and investigative journalist Brian Entin is the sheer noise surrounding this case, an anomaly that defies every established rule of professional kidnapping. Standard criminal profiles suggest that if money were the genuine and sole motive, the perpetrators would have operated in total shadows, avoiding the media circus and the TMZ headlines to maintain control and minimize risk, which leads to the chilling conclusion that the ransom notes and the Bitcoin theater might have been nothing more than a sophisticated costume or a distraction designed to keep the world looking at the spectacle, while the true, perhaps more sinister motive remained hidden in the background. This theory is further bolstered by the psychological insights of renowned profilers like Dr. Gary Brucato and Dr. Ann Burgess, who have begun to fill in a silhouette of the person responsible, a figure described as remarkably unafraid and overconfident, as evidenced by home surveillance footage showing a predator moving with chilling deliberation, no looking over shoulders, and no sign of the typical panic associated with a stranger-led abduction. Dr. Brucato emphasizes the staggering statistical reality that 92% of women who are murdered are killed by someone within their own orbit, someone Nancy would have recognized and potentially even welcomed into her home without a single alarm bell ringing, suggesting that the betrayal came from within her social or professional circle rather than from a random intruder. Dr. Burgess pivots the investigation toward the critical question of benefit, pushing past the theatricality of the ransom to ask who stands to gain in a measurable, permanent way from Nancy Guthrie's total disappearance, a question that recontextualizes the entire 80-day timeline and points toward a motive that isn't financial but perhaps retaliatory or structural. The case has now reached a fever pitch with the revelation that a single hair, recovered from Nancy's bedsheets where the abductor likely leaned over her, has been transferred from a local Arizona lab to the FBI's elite forensic facility in Quantico for advanced testing. A move that Moore suggests is only done when investigators believe they have found the most damning piece of evidence that could bridge the gap between a profile and a name. This hair follicle, potentially containing the DNA of an overconfident killer who didn't realize they were shedding evidence during the physical exertion of the crime, represents the ultimate hope for a breakthrough, especially as the FBI privately prepares the family for the infinitely small chance of a live recovery, transitioning the mission from a rescue to a relentless pursuit of justice. The possibility that more than one person was involved, a blueprint creator and the hands that carried it out, suggests a conspiracy that is inherently fragile because, as Moore points out, secrets shared by multiple owners are bound to eventually leak, especially as the pressure of the Quantico results and the persistent gaze of the public continue to mount. Every detail of this case, from the calculated Bitcoin link to the arrogance of the public ransom notes, points back to a perpetrator who believed they were untouchable and smarter than the system. Yet by creating such a loud and public spectacle, they may have inadvertently ensured that the investigation will never go cold, as the channel and its community remain committed to dissecting every forensic lead until the person who knew Nancy Guthrie and exploited that trust is finally brought to light, proving that while 80 days of silence is a tragedy, the science now unfolding at Quantico may finally provide the answer that breaks the case wide open and restores a semblance of justice to a family trapped in a nameless grief.